Vance Thornwood had watched the sun rise over his modest farm for 7 years without incident, and every morning he wondered why. The other homesteaders along the frontier had all been raided at least once. The Hendersons lost 3 sheep to wolves last winter. The Crawfords had their smokehouse broken into by bandits the year before that. Old man Peterson swore a bear had torn through his chicken coop and made off with half his flock. Yet Vance's property remained untouched, as though some invisible barrier protected his land from the dangers that plagued everyone else in the valley. He stood in his doorway now, coffee mug warming his calloused hands, looking out across the fields where wheat swayed in the morning breeze. His chickens scratched contentedly in their pen. His 2 cows grazed peacefully in the pasture. The forest loomed dark and dense along his northern property line, close enough that he could hear the rustle of leaves when the wind picked up. That forest made other farmers nervous, but Vance had long since stopped worrying about it. He was 32 years old, broad-shouldered from years of labor, with brown hair that fell just past his ears and a beard he kept trimmed short. His face bore the weathered look of a man who spent his days under the sun, lines creasing the corners of his blue eyes. He wore simple clothes, homespun and practical, mended where they had torn. Everything about his life was simple, and he liked it that way. Vance had come to the frontier after his service in the border wars ended. He had seen enough violence, enough bloodshed, enough death to last him several lifetimes. When the king offered land grants to veterans willing to settle the northern territories, Vance had jumped at the chance. He wanted peace. He wanted to grow things instead of destroying them. He wanted to sleep without nightmares. Most nights he succeeded. He finished his coffee and set the mug on the porch railing, then walked toward the barn to begin his morning chores. The routine never changed. Feed the chickens, collect the eggs, milk the cows, check the fences, tend the garden. By midday he would be working the fields, and by evening he would be exhausted enough to eat a simple meal and fall into bed. It was lonely work, but loneliness felt safer than companionship. The closest town was a 2-hour ride away, and Vance only went there once a month to trade his surplus crops and eggs for supplies he could not produce himself. He spoke to people when necessary, nodded politely, and returned to his farm as quickly as possible. The townspeople thought him strange, a hermit farmer who kept to himself, but they did not pry. Veterans were often like that, they understood. What they did not understand, what Vance himself did not understand, was why his farm remained so peculiarly safe. He was thinking about this again as he scattered feed for the chickens. A wolf had been spotted near the Miller farm just last week, bold enough to approach in daylight. Yet Vance had never seen a wolf anywhere near his property. He had found tracks once, large canine prints in the mud near the tree line, but they always stopped at the edge of his land and turned back into the forest. The chickens clucked and pecked at the grain, oblivious to his thoughts. Vance moved on to the cows, bringing them fresh water and checking their hooves. Everything was as it should be. Everything was always as it should be. He was mending a weak spot in the pasture fence when he felt it, that strange, prickling sensation on the back of his neck that meant someone was watching him. He had learned to trust that feeling during the war. It had saved his life more than once. Vance straightened slowly, his hand instinctively moving toward the knife at his belt. He scanned the tree line, his eyes searching the shadows between the trunks. Nothing moved, no bird sang. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then he saw her. She stood just inside the forest, partially obscured by a massive oak tree. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, that the shadows and leaves were creating the illusion of a figure. But as he stared, she stepped forward slightly, and there was no mistaking what he was seeing. An orc. Vance's breath caught in his chest. His fingers tightened around the knife handle, though he did not draw it. He had fought orcs during the war, had seen them cut down human soldiers with brutal efficiency. They were supposed to be savage, mindless killers. That was what his commanders had told him. That was what everyone believed, but this orc was not attacking. She was simply standing there, watching him with the same cautious intensity that he was watching her. She was tall, perhaps 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a muscular build that spoke of considerable strength. Her skin was a deep green, darker than spring leaves but lighter than the forest pines. She wore leather armor that looked well made and practical, fitted to her form without unnecessary decoration. Dark hair fell in a thick braid over one shoulder. Even from this distance, he could see the small tusks that protruded from her lower jaw, white against her green skin. They stared at each other for a long moment. Vance's heart hammered in his chest, but he forced himself to remain still. Running would be pointless. If she wanted to kill him, she could probably run him down before he made it halfway to the house. Fighting would be equally futile. He was a decent fighter, but he was not arrogant enough to think he could best an orc warrior in single combat, so he did the only thing that made sense. He slowly released his knife and raised his hands, showing they were empty. The orc's eyes, which he could now see were a striking amber color, widened slightly. She had not expected that. She took another step forward, emerging more fully from the shadows, and Vance could see her face more clearly now. She had strong features, a broad nose and high cheekbones. There was something almost beautiful about her, though he felt strange thinking it. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then seemed to think better of it. Instead, she lifted one hand in what might have been a gesture of peace or farewell. Vance could not tell which. Then she turned and melted back into the forest, disappearing so quickly and quietly that he might have imagined the entire encounter. Vance stood frozen by the fence for several minutes after she vanished, his mind racing. An orc had been watching him from the forest. How long had she been there? Why had she not attacked? And more importantly, had she been the reason his farm had remained so mysteriously safe all these years? The thought seemed absurd, but he could not shake it. He had seen the way she looked at him, not with hunger or malice, but with something closer to curiosity. Perhaps even concern, though that seemed like wishful thinking. He returned to his work, but his hands shook as he hammered nails into the fence post. He kept glancing toward the tree line, expecting to see her again, but the forest remained still and silent. By the time evening came, he had almost convinced himself that exhaustion or loneliness had caused him to hallucinate. Almost, but not quite. That night, Vance lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. He kept seeing those amber eyes watching him from the shadows. He kept wondering what would have happened if he had tried to speak to her, or if he had drawn his weapon instead of raising his hands in peace. The next morning, he woke with a sense of purpose that surprised him. He went about his usual chores, but when he finished, he did something he had never done before. He walked to the edge of his property, as close to the tree line as he dared, and he left a small offering there. It was just a loaf of bread, one he had baked the previous day. He placed it on a flat rock near the forest edge, then stepped back and returned to his house. He felt foolish doing it, like a child leaving out milk for fairies, but something compelled him to try. The bread was gone by evening. Vance's pulse quickened when he saw the empty rock. An animal could have taken it, of course. A fox or raccoon would not turn down fresh bread, but somehow he knew that was not what had happened. He left another offering the next day, this time a small wedge of cheese wrapped in cloth. It too disappeared before sunset. On the third day, he brought a basket containing bread, cheese, and a handful of early apples from his small orchard. He set it down on the rock, then retreated a short distance and waited. The sun was beginning to set when she appeared. She moved through the forest with remarkable stealth for someone of her size, making barely a sound as she approached the edge of the trees. She stopped when she saw him standing there, her body tensing as if ready to flee or fight. Vance held up his hands again, the same peaceful gesture from before. "I mean no harm," he called out, keeping his voice low and steady. "I just wanted to say thank you." The orc tilted her head slightly, confusion crossing her features. She glanced at the basket, then back at him. "For keeping my farm safe," Vance continued. "That is what you have been doing, is it not? All these years, you have been protecting my land." For a long moment she said nothing. Then, in a voice that was deeper than a human woman's but smoother than he expected, she spoke. "You should not be speaking to me." Her accent was unusual, clipping some consonants and elongating vowels in unexpected places, but her words were clear and her grammar perfect. Vance found himself surprised by how articulate she sounded, then immediately felt ashamed of his surprise. He had been conditioned to think of orcs as bestial, but clearly that conditioning was wrong. "Why not?" he asked. "Because I am an orc," she said simply. "Your kind kills my kind kills your kind, this is the way of things." "I do not want to kill you," Vance said. "I stopped killing when the war ended. I came here to farm, to live in peace." She studied him with those penetrating amber eyes, as if trying to determine whether he was telling the truth. "Most humans say one thing and do another." "I am not most humans," Vance replied. He gestured to the basket. "Please take the food. It is a poor thanks for what you have done, but it is what I can offer." The orc hesitated, then stepped forward cautiously. She moved like a predator, balanced and ready to react at the slightest threat. But when she reached the basket, she knelt and examined its contents with an expression that might have been wonder. "You grow these?" she asked, holding up one of the apples. "I have a small orchard on the south side of my property," Vance said. "This variety ripens early. They are best eaten fresh." She bit into the apple and her eyes widened slightly. "It is good. Thank you." Vance took a small step closer, emboldened by her acceptance of his offering. "May I ask your name?" She looked at him for a long moment, and he thought she might refuse to answer. But then she said, "Krazka. My name is Krazka." "I am Vance," he said. "Vance Thornwood, this is my farm." "I know," Krazka said. "I have watched you since you came here. 7 years, 3 months, and 11 days. The specificity of her answer startled him. "You have been watching me all that time?" "Yes." She packed the basket's contents carefully, as if each item was precious. "When you first arrived, I was going to drive you away. This land borders my clan's hunting territory. But then I watched you work. You did not hunt more than you needed. You did not cut down trees without purpose. You did not poison the streams or trap the game recklessly. You were respectful of the land, so I decided to let you stay." "And you protected me," Vance said softly. Krazka stood, the basket in her hands. "The wolves do not come because I warned their pack to stay away. The thieves do not come because I left signs that this land is claimed by an orc. Most humans are too frightened to risk an orc's territory." "You could have told me," Vance said. "All these years, you could have introduced yourself." "To what end?" Krazka's voice held a note of something that might have been sadness. "You would have either attacked me or fled. All humans do." Vance thought about that, about how he had reacted when he first saw her. His hand had gone to his weapon. His body had prepared for violence. She was right to have kept her distance, and yet something about that fact made his chest ache. "I am glad you revealed yourself," he said finally. "And I am grateful for everything you have done. If there is ever anything I can do to repay you, please tell me." Krazka looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. "Just continue as you have been. That is payment enough." She turned to leave, then paused. "I will return the basket tomorrow." "Keep it," Vance said. "Consider it a gift." She nodded once, then disappeared into the darkening forest as silently as she had come. Vance walked back to his house in a daze, his mind reeling from the conversation. He had spoken to an orc. Not just spoken, but had a civil, almost friendly exchange. It went against everything he had been taught, everything society believed, and yet it had felt more natural than most of his interactions with other humans. He found himself looking forward to the next day, hoping she would return the basket as promised, hoping he might see her again. She did return the basket, leaving it on the rock in the early morning while Vance was tending his chickens. Inside, he found the vessel cleaned and, to his surprise, a small gift. It was a carved wooden figure, no longer than his thumb, depicting a hawk in flight. The craftsmanship was exquisite, every feather detailed, the wings positioned at the perfect angle to suggest soaring. Vance held the tiny carving carefully, marveling at the skill required to create something so delicate. He had not imagined that hands built for war could produce such art. That evening, he returned to the Treeline with the basket filled again, this time including a clay jar of honey he had traded for in town the previous month. He also brought paper and a pencil, and he wrote a brief note. "Thank you for the beautiful carving. You are very talented." He left the basket and the note, then returned to his house. He found himself watching the Treeline more than usual as he worked, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. Just before sunset, he saw movement at the forest edge. Krazka emerged, moving more confidently than before. She retrieved the basket and read the note, her lips moving slightly as she sounded out the words. Then she looked toward the house, and even from a distance, Vance could see her smile. It was a small smile, constrained by her tusks, but it transformed her entire face. She looked younger when she smiled, less like a warrior and more like someone who might enjoy simple pleasures like honey and bread. This became their routine. Every few days, Vance would leave a basket of food and sometimes a note. Krazka would return the basket cleaned and often with a small gift inside. A carved bird, a smooth stone from the river, a bundle of medicinal herbs tied with grass. They were small tokens, but each one felt significant to Vance, proof that this strange friendship was real. After 2 weeks of this silent exchange, Vance decided to try something bolder. Instead of leaving the basket and retreating, he stayed near the Treeline with a blanket spread on the ground and 2 cups beside a pitcher of cold tea. He settled himself on the blanket and waited. The sun was low when Krazka appeared. She stopped at the forest edge, staring at the scene he had arranged. Her expression was wary. "I thought we might share a meal together," Vance called out. "If you are willing." Krazka stood frozen for so long that he thought she would refuse. But then, slowly, she walked toward him. She moved carefully, her eyes scanning the surrounding area as if checking for hidden threats. When she reached the blanket, she lowered herself to sit cross-legged across from him, keeping a careful distance between them. "This is unwise," she said, but she accepted the cup of tea he poured for her. "Probably," Vance agreed. He unwrapped the bread and cheese he had brought, offering her half. "But I was tired of leaving notes. It seemed friendlier to talk in person." Krazka took the food but did not eat immediately. "If anyone saw us, it would be dangerous for both of us. Humans would call you an orc lover, a traitor. My clan would call me weak, corrupted by human sympathy." "There is no one here but us," Vance said gently. "And I do not think sharing a meal makes either of us weak." She considered this, then bit into the bread. They ate in silence for a while, the only sounds the evening bird song and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. It was not an uncomfortable silence, Vance found. It felt natural, like sitting with an old friend who did not need to fill every moment with conversation. "Why did you become a farmer?" Krazka asked eventually. Vance took a sip of tea, considering how much to share. "I was a soldier during the border wars. I fought for 7 years, following orders, killing when I was told to kill. When it ended, I realized I did not know how to do anything else. I did not know who I was beyond being a soldier." He paused, staring into his cup. "I thought if I could grow things instead of destroying them, I might figure out how to be human again." Krazka was quiet for a moment. "Did you ever fight orcs?" "Yes," Vance admitted. There was no point in lying. "I did. I was told you were monsters, that you were trying to destroy human civilization. I believed what I was told because it was easier than questioning orders. And now," her voice was carefully neutral, "now I think war makes monsters of everyone, regardless of what skin they wear." He met her eyes. "I am sorry for what I did. I cannot undo it, but I am sorry." Krazka nodded slowly. "I was also a warrior. I fought humans in those same wars. I killed many of your kind." Her jaw tightened. "I was told humans were greedy, that they would take all the land and leave nothing for anyone else. I believed it because my clan elders said it was true." "We were both following the paths laid before us," Vance said. "Yes," Krazka agreed, "but perhaps we can make new paths now." They finished their meal as darkness fell, and Vance lit a small lantern he had brought. In its warm glow, Krazka's green skin seemed to glow, and he found himself studying her face. She had a small scar above her left eyebrow, another along her jaw. Battle scars, most likely. But there was also a delicacy to her features that surprised him, a gracefulness that contradicted her obvious strength. "You are staring," Krazka said, though she did not sound offended. "I apologize," Vance said quickly. "I was just thinking that you are not what I expected." "What did you expect? Something more monstrous, I suppose. That is what I was taught to see." He shook his head. "But you are just a person. Different from me in some ways, but still just a person." Krazka's expression softened. "You are not what I expected either. Most humans I have observed are loud, careless, destructive. But you are quiet, careful, you speak to your animals kindly, you repair things instead of abandoning them. You are different." "Perhaps we are both different," Vance suggested. "Perhaps," Krazka agreed. They talked long into the night, sharing stories from their pasts, learning about each other's cultures. Vance learned that orcs valued honor and strength, but also artistry and wisdom. Krazka explained that orc clans were matriarchal, led by the strongest and wisest women. She told him about her mother, the clan leader, who had taught her to fight and to think strategically. In turn, Vance told her about growing up on his father's small farm before the war, about learning to read from his mother who had been a teacher. He shared memories of his younger sister, who had died from fever when she was 10. He had not spoken about his family to anyone in years, but somehow it felt right to share these things with Krazka. When the night grew cold and the lantern's oil ran low, Krazka stood to leave. "Thank you for the meal," she said, "and for the conversation. It has been a long time since I spoke with anyone so openly." "You are welcome here anytime," Vance said, rising as well. "I mean that. If you ever want company or just a warm meal, my door is open." Krazka looked at him with an expression that might have been longing. "You offer a kindness that could bring you trouble. I have found that the right kind of trouble is often worth the risk." She smiled at that, a real smile that reached her eyes. Then she melted back into the forest, and Vance was left alone with the lantern and the empty cups. Over the following weeks, Krazka began visiting more frequently. Sometimes she came during the day, helping Vance with tasks that required considerable strength, like moving heavy rocks from his field or repairing a section of barn roof that had been damaged in a storm. She worked efficiently, her powerful muscles making short work of tasks that would have taken Vance days to complete alone. Other times, she came in the evening and they would share meals and conversation. Vance learned that Krazka had been living alone for the past year, voluntarily separating herself from her clan. She had grown disillusioned with the constant raiding and fighting, wanting a more peaceful existence. Her mother, the clan leader, had called her weak and foolish, but had allowed her to leave rather than kill her for defiance, a mercy Krazka still did not fully understand. "I think she hoped I would come back," Krazka said one evening as they sat on Vance's porch, watching the stars emerge. "That I would realize life alone is too hard and return to the clan." "But you have not," Vance observed. "No," Krazka said firmly. "I am happier alone than I ever was with the clan. At least I was alone until I started talking to you." Vance felt warmth spread through his chest at her words. "I am happier since we started talking too. I did not realize how lonely I was until I had someone to share things with." Krazka turned to look at him, and in the dim light from the house, her amber eyes seemed to glow. "Is this friendship what we have?" "I would like to think so," Vance said. "Though I confess I have little experience with friendship. Most people find me too strange or too quiet." "I like that you are quiet," Krazka said. "It means when you speak, your words have weight. Too many people talk just to fill silence." They sat together until late that night, sometimes talking, sometimes simply existing in comfortable silence. When Krazka finally left, Vance found himself reluctant to see her go, already looking forward to her next visit. He was beginning to realize that what he felt for her might be more than friendship, though the thought frightened him. How could he have feelings for an orc? Society would be horrified. His former comrades would call him a traitor. Even Krazka's own people would likely see it as a betrayal. But when she smiled at him, when she laughed at something he said, when she looked at him with those intelligent amber eyes, all those concerns seemed distant and unimportant. What mattered was the way his heart lifted when he saw her approaching through the trees. What mattered was the comfortable silence they shared, the easy conversation, the growing sense that he had found something precious and rare. He tried to push these feelings aside, telling himself they were impossible, impractical, dangerous. But feelings, he was learning, did not respond to logic. Summer deepened into full bloom, and the farm thrived as it never had before. With Krazka's help, Vance was able to expand his fields and make repairs that had been beyond his capability alone. His crops grew strong and healthy, and his animals were content and well fed. The farm had never looked better, but more than the physical improvements, Vance found himself changing in ways he had not anticipated. He laughed more. He slept better. The nightmares from the war, which had plagued him since he arrived at the farm, became less frequent. He felt lighter, as if some burden he had been carrying for years was finally beginning to lift. He knew Krazka was responsible for this change. Her presence had brought life back to his world. One afternoon in late summer, Vance was working in his garden when he heard hoofbeats approaching from the south. He straightened, shading his eyes against the sun, and saw 3 riders heading toward his property. His stomach tightened with anxiety. He rarely had visitors, and unexpected guests usually meant trouble. The riders drew closer, and Vance recognized them as men from town, though he did not know them well. The one in front was named Garrett, a merchant's son with a reputation for gambling and drinking. The other 2 were his frequent companions, whose names Vance could not recall. "Afternoon," Garrett called as they reined in their horses near Vance's garden fence. "You are Thornwood, right? The hermit farmer." "I am Vance Thornwood," Vance replied evenly. "Can I help you with something?" "Maybe," Garrett said, dismounting. The other two followed his lead. "We have been having trouble with raiders in the area. Lost some livestock, had a barn burned. We are forming a patrol, checking in on the outlying farms, making sure everyone is safe and aware." "I appreciate the concern," Vance said, "but I have not had any trouble." Garrett's eyes narrowed. "No trouble at all. That seems odd. Everyone else has been hit at least once." "I have been fortunate," Vance said carefully. One of the other men, a stocky fellow with a ruddy face, spoke up. "Some folks in town have been saying your farm is protected by dark magic. They say nothing ever goes wrong here, like you made a deal with something unnatural." Vance forced himself to remain calm. "I assure you, I practice no magic, dark or otherwise. I am simply a farmer trying to make an honest living." Garrett walked around the garden, examining the healthy plants with suspicious eyes. "Your crops look awfully good for someone farming alone. Most men would struggle to maintain this much land by themselves." "I work hard," Vance said. "Or maybe you have help," Garrett suggested. He glanced toward the tree line. "Those woods are known to house orcs. Maybe you made a deal with them. Protection in exchange for supplies, information about the other farms." Vance's blood ran cold, but he kept his expression neutral. "That is a serious accusation. Do you have any evidence?" "Just odd circumstances," Garrett said. "A farm that never suffers losses, crops that grow better than anyone else's, a farmer who keeps to himself and acts nervous when decent folk come calling." "I am not nervous," Vance lied. "I am simply busy. I have work to do before sundown." The ruddy-faced man moved closer to the tree line, peering into the shadows. "If there are orcs in those woods, they should be cleared out. Monsters do not belong this close to human settlements." "The forest is beyond my property line," Vance said quickly. "What lives in there is not my concern." "Maybe it should be," Garrett said. His hand rested casually on the hilt of his sword. "A good human would want to help rid the area of the orc threat." Vance measured the distance between himself and the house, where his own sword hung on the wall. He could not reach it before these men could draw their weapons. If they decided to cause trouble, he would be at a severe disadvantage. But before the situation could escalate further, a sound echoed from the forest, deep and guttural. It was something between a roar and a growl, primal and threatening. The horses immediately began to whinny and dance nervously. The three men spun toward the tree line, hands going to their weapons. "What in the blazes was that?" the ruddy man gasped. "Just a bear, most likely," Vance said, though his heart was pounding. He knew that sound had not come from a bear. Krazka was warning them, protecting him even now. Another growl echoed through the trees, closer this time. The horses were becoming increasingly agitated, pulling at their reins. "We should go," the third man said nervously. He had drawn his sword and was staring at the forest with wide eyes. "If there is a bear in there, we do not want to be here when it comes out." Garrett looked like he wanted to argue, but another threatening sound from the forest changed his mind. "Fine. But Thornwood, you should be careful. If you are dealing with something in those woods, it is going to get you killed eventually. And if we find out you are collaborating with orcs, there will be consequences." "Duly noted," Vance said flatly. The three men mounted their horses quickly and rode off at a faster pace than they had arrived. Vance watched until they disappeared down the road, then turned toward the forest. Krazka emerged from the tree line, her expression grim. "They suspect something." "Your intervention likely saved me from a beating or worse," Vance said. "Thank you." "They will come back," Krazka said, "or send others. Suspicious humans are dangerous humans." Vance nodded, running a hand through his hair. I know, I need to be more careful. Maybe we should stop seeing each other for a while until things settle down. Krazka's face fell just for a moment before she schooled it back to neutrality. If that is what you think is best. It is not what I want, Vance said quickly. Krazka, your friendship has become one of the most important things in my life. The thought of not seeing you, not talking to you, it is painful, but I do not want to bring danger to you. I can handle danger, Krazka said. I have faced worse than suspicious farmers. I know you can, but I would never forgive myself if you were hurt because of me. Krazka stepped closer, and Vance could smell the forest on her, pine and earth and wildflowers. Do you know why I have stayed near your farm all these years? Why I protected you. You said I was respectful of the land. That was part of it, Krazka admitted. But the truth is I was lonely. I had left my clan, left everything I knew, and I was alone in the world. Watching you work your farm, seeing you care for your animals and tend your crops, it gave me a sense of connection. I felt less alone knowing you were there. Vance's breath caught. Krazka. When we finally spoke, when you offered me friendship, you gave me something I did not even realize I was desperate for. I will not give that up because of fear. I have lived in fear long enough. The intensity in her eyes made Vance's heart race. Without thinking, he reached out and took her hand. Her skin was warm and rough with calluses, her fingers longer and thicker than his. She stiffened at the contact, then slowly relaxed, her hand settling in his. I do not want to give this up either, Vance said softly. I care about you, Krazka. More than I probably should, more than makes sense. But I do. I care about you too, Krazka said, her voice barely above a whisper. In my clan, such feelings would be seen as weakness, as betrayal, but I cannot help what I feel. They stood there, hands clasped, the admission hanging between them like something fragile and precious. Vance wanted to say more, wanted to close the distance between them, wanted to do something to show her the depth of what he felt. But he also knew they needed to be cautious. The men from town had made the danger very clear. We will need to be more careful, Vance said finally. No more visits during the day when you might be seen. And if anyone comes around asking questions, we need a plan. Krazka nodded. I will watch the roads. If I see riders coming, I will warn you. Thank you. Vance squeezed her hand gently, then reluctantly let go. Come tonight after dark, we will talk more then. Krazka agreed and disappeared back into the forest. Vance returned to his work, but his mind was racing with what had just happened. They had admitted their feelings for each other, had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The thought both thrilled and terrified him. That night, Krazka came to his house after the sun had fully set. Vance had prepared a meal, and they ate together at his small kitchen table. It felt remarkably domestic, sitting across from each other in the lamplight, passing dishes and refilling cups, like they were simply two people sharing a meal, rather than human and orc defying centuries of prejudice and hatred. What happens now? Krazka asked after they had finished eating. We have admitted what we feel, but what does that mean? I do not know, Vance admitted. I have never felt this way about anyone before, and given our circumstances, I do not think there is any guide or precedent for what we should do. My clan would demand your death if they knew I had feelings for a human, Krazka said matter-of-factly. They would see it as the ultimate betrayal of orc values, and the humans would likely try to kill us both, Vance added. At best, we would be driven out of the territory. So we have no future, Krazka said quietly. I did not say that. Vance reached across the table and took her hand again, marveling at how natural the gesture felt. We have a future if we are brave enough to claim it. It will not be easy, and it will not be what either of us expected. But I believe we can make it work. How? We continue as we have been, but more carefully. We build a life together here on this farm. It is far enough from town that we can have privacy, and close enough to the forest that you can still access your hunting grounds. We make this place our sanctuary, where the rules of orcs and humans do not apply. Krazka looked around the modest kitchen, her eyes lingering on the details, the worn table, the simple shelves, the blackened fireplace. You would want me to live here, with you. If you wanted to, Vance said carefully. I would not presume to assume, but yes, I would like nothing more than to share this place with you. I have lived in the wild for a year, Krazka said. I have a shelter in the forest, but it is crude, barely more than a lean-to. This would be much more comfortable, she paused. But would you truly want an orc in your home? Your life would be easier without me. My life would be emptier without you, Vance corrected. Easier does not mean better. I have spent 7 years trying to find peace, and I did not truly find it until I met you. I will not give that up for the sake of an easier life. Krazka's eyes shimmered with what might have been tears, though she blinked them away quickly. You are a strange human, Vance Thornwood. And you are an extraordinary orc, Krazka. He hesitated, then asked, You never told me your clan name. I gave up my clan name when I left, Krazka said. In orc culture, to leave the clan is to renounce your lineage. I am just Krazka now. Then you could take a new name, Vance suggested. If you wanted to. What kind of name? Any kind. Or you could keep just Krazka. I merely meant that you could choose to define yourself however you wish. You are not bound by orc traditions if you do not want to be. Krazka considered this, a small smile playing at her lips. I like being just Krazka. It is simple, honest, but perhaps one day, if things between us continue to grow, I might consider another name. She looked at him meaningfully, and Vance understood. She was talking about marriage, about taking his family name. The thought should have terrified him, but instead it filled him with a warm sense of rightness. Yes, he thought. Yes, I want that, but he did not say it aloud. It was too soon, too much. They needed to take things slowly, to build their relationship on a solid foundation before making such permanent commitments. They talked late into the night, making plans, discussing practicalities. Krazka would continue to sleep in the forest for now, to maintain the appearance that nothing had changed. But she would visit every night, and they would gradually move some of her possessions into Vance's house. If anyone came around asking questions, Krazka would hide, and Vance would deny any knowledge of an orc presence. It was not a perfect plan, but it was a start. Over the following weeks, they fell into a comfortable routine. Krazka would arrive each evening after dark, and they would share a meal and conversation. Sometimes they worked together on projects for the farm. Krazka helped Vance build a new storage shed, and her strength and skill with construction made the work go quickly. Other times, they simply sat together, reading books from Vance's small collection or playing simple games with carved wooden pieces. Vance found himself happier than he had ever been. Coming home each evening with the knowledge that Krazka would be there soon gave him something to look forward to. Her laughter filled his quiet house with warmth. Her presence made even mundane tasks feel special. He was also discovering new things about her constantly. She had a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard. She was surprisingly well-read, having learned to read from captured human books during the war. She loved music, though she was too self-conscious to sing in front of him. She was patient and thoughtful, always considering multiple angles before making decisions, and she was beautiful. The more time Vance spent with her, the more he saw past the surface differences between them and recognized the beauty in her strong features, her expressive eyes, her graceful movements. He found himself wanting to touch her, to be close to her, to show her physically what he felt emotionally. but he held back, uncertain how to proceed. Orc customs regarding courtship and physical affection were different from human ones, and he did not want to offend or frighten her by moving too quickly. It was Krazka who finally broke through his hesitation. One evening in early autumn, as they sat together on his porch watching the sunset, she reached over and took his hand. It was a simple gesture, one they had done many times before, but this time she did not let go. She held his hand and gently pulled him closer. Vance shifted nearer, his heart pounding. Krazka turned to face him, her amber eyes searching his. "May I kiss you?" she asked quietly. "Yes," Vance breathed. "Please." She leaned in slowly, giving him time to change his mind, but he did not want to. When her lips met his, it was gentle and tentative, both of them learning each other. Her tusks made the angle slightly different from kissing a human, but Vance quickly adjusted. Her lips were softer than he expected, and she tasted faintly of the apple pie they had shared for dessert. The kiss lasted only a few seconds before they pulled apart, both slightly breathless. Krazka smiled, a genuine, joyful smile that made Vance's heart soar. "That was nice," she said. "It was perfect," Vance agreed. He cupped her face gently, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "You are perfect." "I am not," Krazka protested, but she was still smiling. "I am scarred and rough. I have killed people. I have made many mistakes." "And I still think you are perfect," Vance insisted. "Not despite those things, but including them. Everything you have been through, everything you have survived, it has made you who you are. And who you are is someone I love." The word slipped out before he could stop it, but he did not regret it. It was true. He loved her. He had probably loved her for weeks, but had been too afraid to admit it. Krazka's eyes widened. "You love me." "I do," Vance confirmed. "I know it is fast, I know it is complicated, but yes, I love you, Krazka." She was quiet for a long moment, and Vance felt a flutter of fear. Had he said too much? Had he ruined everything? Then Krazka smiled again, even wider than before. "I love you too, Vance. I have loved you for longer than I wanted to admit. I thought these feelings were foolish, impossible, but I cannot deny them anymore." They kissed again, longer this time, more confident. Vance pulled her close, and Krazka came willingly, her strong arms wrapping around him. They fit together perfectly, despite their physical differences. Or perhaps because of them, each one filling the spaces the other left empty. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling like fools. They stayed on the porch until late in the night, holding each other, talking in soft voices, occasionally stealing kisses. It felt like the beginning of something wonderful, something that could last forever if they were careful and lucky. But luck, Vance knew, was a fickle thing. The trouble came 2 weeks later, on a crisp October morning. Vance was repairing a loose board on his barn when he heard the sound of many horses approaching. His stomach dropped. 1 or 2 riders might be travelers passing through, but a large group meant something more serious. He set down his hammer and walked toward the road, his mind racing through possible explanations and excuses. As the riders came into view, he counted 8 men, all armed. Garrett was among them, along with the ruddy-faced man from before. The others were strangers to Vance, but they had the hard look of men who were comfortable with violence. The group reined in their horses at the edge of Vance's property. Garrett dismounted, his hand resting on his sword hilt. "Thornwood, we need to have a conversation." "What about?" Vance asked, keeping his voice level despite his pounding heart. "About the orc that has been seen near your property," Garrett said bluntly. "Multiple people have reported seeing a female orc in these woods. Some say they have seen her near your farm specifically." Vance forced himself to look confused. "I have not seen any orcs. As I told you before, I occasionally hear animals in the forest, but that is all." "You are lying," the ruddy-faced man accused. "We talked to a hunter who swears he saw an orc woman coming out of your house 3 nights ago. Said she stayed for hours before going back into the woods." Vance's blood turned to ice. They had been so careful, always waiting until full dark, always checking for observers. But apparently they had not been careful enough. "The hunter was mistaken," Vance said firmly. "Perhaps he saw shadows and imagined more. Or perhaps you are harboring an orc," Garrett said coldly, "which would make you a traitor to your own kind." "That is a serious accusation," Vance said. "One you cannot prove. Then you will not mind if we search your property," Garrett said. It was not a question. Vance's mind raced. Krazka kept some personal items hidden in a small space under his floorboards. If they searched thoroughly, they would find evidence of her presence. And if they found that evidence, both he and Krazka would be in mortal danger. "I do mind," Vance said. "This is my land, and I am a veteran who served honorably. You have no authority to search my property without evidence of wrongdoing." "We have the testimony of a witness," the ruddy-faced man said. "You have the testimony of a hunter who saw something in the dark and jumped to conclusions," Vance countered. "That is not evidence." Garrett's eyes narrowed. "You are being awfully defensive for someone with nothing to hide." "I am being defensive because you are accusing me of treason," Vance shot back. "I've lived peacefully here for 7 years, bothering no one, and now you come to my home with armed men making accusations. How would you react in my position?" One of the other men, an older fellow with gray in his beard, spoke up. "He has a point, Garrett. We cannot just barge onto a veteran's land without proper evidence. If the magistrate hears we did that, there will be trouble." Garrett looked frustrated but reluctant to argue with the older man. "Fine. But Thornwood, you should know that we will be watching this area more closely. If there is an orc in these woods, we will find it. And if we discover you have been protecting it, you will face consequences." "I understand," Vance said, though his jaw was clenched so tight it ached. The men remounted and rode away, though Garrett kept looking back over his shoulder as if hoping to catch Vance in some revealing action. Vance stood motionless until they were out of sight, then hurried into the forest. "Krazka," he called in a loud whisper. "Krazka, where are you?" She appeared from behind a large tree, her expression worried. "I heard voices. What happened?" "They know," Vance said urgently. "Someone saw you leaving my house. They came here making accusations. I denied everything, but they are suspicious. We need to be even more careful now." Krazka's face hardened. "I should leave. Go far away where they cannot find me. If I am gone, they will have no proof and you will be safe." "No," Vance said firmly. He took her hands in his. "I do not want you to leave. We will find a way through this." "How?" Krazka asked. "They are actively looking for me now. It is only a matter of time before they catch me, and when they do, they will kill me. And they will punish you for protecting me." "Then we make sure they do not catch you," Vance said. "You are a skilled warrior, a hunter. You know how to move unseen. And I am a veteran. I know how to think tactically. Together we can outsmart them. And if we cannot—" Krazka's voice was small, frightened in a way he had never heard before. "Then we run," Vance said. "We take what we can carry and go somewhere far away, somewhere we can live in peace." "I will not let them hurt you, Krazka. I would rather abandon everything I have built here than lose you." Tears welled in Krazka's eyes, and this time she did not try to hide them. "You would give up your farm for me?" Without hesitation, Vance said. He pulled her into an embrace, holding her tightly. "The farm is just land and buildings. You are irreplaceable. I love you, Krazka. I will do whatever it takes to keep you safe." She buried her face against his shoulder, her body shaking with silent sobs. Vance held her, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring reassurances. He had never seen her cry before, had never seen her show such vulnerability. It made his protective instincts surge even stronger. When she finally calmed, she pulled back and wiped her eyes. "I am sorry. Warriors should not cry." "Everyone cries," Vance said gently. "It does not make you weak, it makes you human." He paused, then corrected himself with a slight smile. "Well, you know what I mean." That got a small laugh from her, which was what he had hoped for. "Yes, I know what you mean." They spent the rest of the day making plans. Krazka would move deeper into the forest, far from the areas where hunters typically went. She would visit Vance's farm only at night, and only after carefully scouting to ensure no one was watching. Vance would go about his normal routine, making it appear that he was just a solitary farmer with nothing to hide. It was a tense time. Every sound made Vance jump. Every shadow looked like a potential threat. He saw riders passing on the distant road more frequently than usual, and he knew they were patrolling, looking for evidence of Krazka's presence. Krazka came to him only twice over the next week, and both visits were brief. She looked tired and stressed, the constant vigilance wearing on her. Vance wished he could do more to help, but all he could offer was food. A few hours of companionship and reassurances that they would get through this together. Then, on a cold evening in late October, Vance heard a sound that made his heart stop. Dogs barking and getting closer. They were hunting dogs, and from the sound of it, there were several of them. He rushed outside and saw torches in the distance, moving through the forest. They were searching the woods with dogs, likely trying to track Krazka's scent. If they found her trail, they would follow it. And if they followed it, they would discover her shelter and possibly trace it back to Vance's farm. Vance ran into the forest, moving as quickly as he dared in the darkness. He had to find Krazka before the hunting party did. He called her name softly, praying she was nearby and would hear him. She appeared beside him so suddenly that he nearly shouted in surprise. "They are hunting me," she said grimly. "The dogs picked up my scent near the southern road." "We need to go," Vance said. "Right now. We cannot outrun them forever, but we can get enough of a head start to escape the immediate area." "Where would we go?" "North," Vance said. "There are mountains 2 days' ride from here. The terrain is rough, but there are caves and hidden valleys where we could hide. I scouted that area when I first came to the frontier. I know the land." Krazka nodded. "Get what you need from your house. I will meet you at the northern edge of your property in 10 minutes. They split up, moving quickly. Vance ran to his house and grabbed a pack, stuffing it with food, a bedroll, flint and steel, and some coins he had saved. He belted on his sword and took a bow and quiver of arrows from the wall. It was not much, but it would have to be enough. As he was leaving, he paused in the doorway and looked back at the house that had been his home for 7 years. He felt a pang of loss, but it was surprisingly small. This place had given him peace, but Krazka had given him purpose. He would miss the farm, but he would not regret leaving it. He closed the door behind him and ran toward the meeting point. Krazka was already there, a pack on her back and her weapons at her side. She looked fierce and ready, the warrior she had been before they met. "Ready?" she asked. "Ready," Vance confirmed. They set off into the night, moving north through the forest. Behind them, the barking of dogs grew louder, and they could see more torches spreading through the trees. The hunting party was large and determined. But Vance and Krazka were also determined, and they had the advantage of knowing they were running for their lives. They moved quickly, Krazka leading the way with her superior night vision and knowledge of the forest. Vance followed close behind, trusting her to guide them safely. They crossed streams to break their scent trail and climbed over rocky areas where the dogs would have trouble following. After an hour of running, they paused to catch their breath. The sounds of pursuit were more distant now, but still present. They were not safe yet. How far to the mountains? Krazka asked between breaths. On foot, probably 3 days, Vance said. But we are moving faster than normal. Maybe 2.5 days if we push hard. Can we lose them before then? I think so. The mountains have multiple passes and hidden trails. Even if they follow us that far, we can disappear once we get into the high country. Krazka nodded, then grabbed his hand and squeezed it. Thank you for coming with me. You did not have to do this. Yes, I did, Vance said simply. You are my future, Krazka. I am not letting that go. They continued through the night, finally stopping to rest when the sun began to rise. They found a secluded hollow beneath an overhanging rock formation, well hidden from casual observation. Krazka kept watch while Vance slept for a few hours, then they switched. It was not proper rest, but it was better than nothing. When evening came, they resumed their journey. The terrain was growing more rugged as they approached the foothills of the mountains. The trees here were older and more widely spaced, with rocky outcroppings jutting up between them. It was harder going, but also easier to spot potential threats. On the second day, they saw their pursuers in the distance, moving along a parallel ridge. There were at least a dozen men, maybe more, and they had dogs with them. But they were not close enough to be an immediate threat, and Vance and Krazka were able to move faster through the difficult terrain than the larger group. By the third evening, they reached the mountains proper. The air was noticeably colder here, and patches of early snow clung to the shadowed areas between rocks. Vance led them to a narrow pass he remembered from his earlier exploration, barely wide enough for 2 people to walk side by side. The pass wound upward through steep rock walls, eventually opening onto a high valley that was invisible from below. The valley was small, perhaps a half-mile across, surrounded on all sides by steep mountain walls. A stream ran through its center, fed by snowmelt from the peaks above. There was grass for grazing and trees for shelter. It was isolated and defensible, a perfect place to hide. This is amazing, Krazka said, looking around in wonder. How did you find this place? I was exploring during my first year on the frontier, Vance explained. I thought this might be a good place to retreat to if things ever went badly. I never imagined I would actually need it. They made camp near the stream, building a small fire to warm themselves and cook a meal. As they ate, they discussed their situation. We cannot stay here forever, Krazka said. Eventually, we will run out of supplies and winter is coming. This valley will be buried in snow within a few weeks. I know, Vance said, but it gives us time to plan. The hunting party will not find this place easily, and even if they do, it is highly defensible. We can rest here, regain our strength, and decide our next move. What options do we have? Krazka asked. We cannot return to your farm. My clan territory is to the west, but they would not welcome me, especially not with a human companion. Going to human settlements is obviously dangerous. There are frontier towns farther north, Vance said slowly. Beyond the mountains in territories that are not yet fully settled. The people there tend to be more accepting of differences because they are all running from something. We might be able to start fresh there. As what? Farmers again? Why not? Vance smiled. It is what I know best, and you have proven to be an excellent farmer yourself. We could find unclaimed land, build a new homestead, live quietly. Krazka looked thoughtful. It would be difficult, starting from nothing in unknown territory. We would be together, Vance said. That makes any difficulty worth facing. She smiled and moved closer to him, resting her head on his shoulder. You always know what to say. Not always, Vance admitted, but when it comes to you, the words come easily. They stayed in the valley for 5 days, resting and recovering from their flight. No pursuers appeared, and they began to relax slightly. They explored the valley together, finding a small cave that would provide better shelter than their tent. They gathered firewood and foraged for edible plants. Krazka hunted a mountain goat, providing them with fresh meat. It was hard work, but there was also a strange peace to it. They were alone in the wilderness, cut off from the world that had judged them. Here, it did not matter that he was human and she was an orc. They were simply two people who loved each other, trying to build a life together. On the evening of the 5th day, as they sat by their fire watching stars emerge in the darkening sky, Vance made a decision. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small item he had grabbed from his house during their escape. It was a ring, simple silver with a small blue stone. It had belonged to his mother, one of the few possessions of hers he still owned. He had carried it with him through the war and kept it safe all these years. "Krazka," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "I know our circumstances are difficult. I know we face an uncertain future. But I also know that I love you more than I have ever loved anyone or anything. I want to build a life with you, whatever form that life takes." He held out the ring. "In human culture, this is a proposal, a promise to bind our lives together permanently. I do not know if your people have similar customs, but I hope you understand what I am asking." Krazka stared at the ring, her eyes wide. "You want to marry me?" "I do," Vance said. "If you will have me." Tears rolled down Krazka's green cheeks, catching the firelight. "Orcs do not have marriage exactly as humans do, but we have bonding ceremonies. When two orcs decide to build a life together, they exchange weapons as a symbol of their commitment to protect each other." She reached to her belt and drew a dagger, beautiful and deadly, with a carved bone handle. "This was my mother's blade, given to me when I became a warrior. It is my most precious possession." She held it out to Vance. "I give it to you now, as a symbol of my bond to you." Vance accepted the dagger with trembling hands, understanding the significance of the gift. He drew his own dagger, the one he had carried through the war, and offered it to her. "And I give you this, for the same reason." Krazka took his blade, holding it reverently. Then she held out her hand, and Vance slipped the ring onto her finger. It was too small for most of her fingers, but it fit perfectly on her smallest one. "So we are bonded now?" Vance asked. "In both orc and human tradition, we are," Krazka confirmed. She leaned forward and kissed him, deep and passionate. When they pulled apart, both were smiling through their tears. "I never thought I would find this," Krazka said softly. "Love, partnership, a future. I thought I would spend my life alone." "You will never be alone again," Vance promised. "Whatever comes, we face it together." They held each other as the fire burned down to embers, neither wanting to let go. They had lost much in the past week, but they had also gained something infinitely precious. They had each other, fully and completely, bound by promises that transcended the prejudices of their respective peoples. The next morning, they began preparing for the journey north. They could not stay in the valley forever. Winter was approaching too quickly. They needed to reach the northern territories before the mountain passes became impassable. They traveled for 2 weeks, moving carefully through the mountains and avoiding any signs of human habitation. It was hard going. The mountain trails were treacherous, and the weather grew colder each day. But they persevered, supporting each other through the difficult moments. Finally, they descended from the mountains into a new land. The northern territories were wilder than the frontier Vance had left behind, with vast forests and rolling hills stretching as far as the eye could see. Small settlements dotted the landscape, but they were far apart, connected by rough trails rather than proper roads. They avoided the settlements at first, unsure of how people here would react to them. But eventually, They needed supplies, and Vance made a careful approach to a small trading post. The man who ran the post was grizzled and scarred, with the look of someone who had seen too much to be easily shocked. He looked Vance up and down, taking in his weathered appearance and the orc dagger at his belt. "You look like you have had a rough time of it," the trader said. "You could say that," Vance replied carefully. "I am looking to buy supplies. Food, tools, seeds if you have them, I can pay." The trader nodded. "We have all that. You settling around here, planning to," Vance said. "Looking for unclaimed land where I can start a farm." "There is plenty of that," the trader said. "This whole territory is wide open. You just stake a claim and work it, it is yours. Magistrate comes through twice a year to record claims and settle disputes, but mostly folks just do as they please." "That sounds good," Vance said. He hesitated, then decided to risk honesty. "I should tell you I am not alone. My partner is an orc. If that is going to be a problem, I would rather know now." The trader raised an eyebrow. "An orc, huh? That is unusual, but I suppose it is your business. Long as you pay for what you take and do not cause trouble, I do not care who you keep company with." Vance felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "Thank you. That is all I ask." He bought supplies, trading some of the coins he had saved plus a few items he and Krazka had crafted during their journey. The trader was fair in his dealings, and he even offered advice about where to find good farmland. When Vance returned to where Krazka was waiting, he was grinning. "I think we are going to be all right here." They found a beautiful piece of land 2 days' walk from the trading post, nestled in a valley with a clear stream and rich soil. There were no neighbors within sight, giving them the privacy they needed. Vance staked their claim by building a marker cairn, as was the custom in the Northern Territories. Then they began the hard work of building a new life. They constructed a cabin first, working together to cut logs and fit them into place. It took weeks, but slowly their home took shape. It was larger than Vance's previous house, with room for expansion. They built a barn for animals they did not yet own and cleared fields for crops they would plant in the spring. The work was exhausting but satisfying. Every board they placed, every fence post they set, was proof that they could build something together. They were creating a home that belonged to both of them equally, a place where they could be themselves without fear or pretense. As winter closed in, they finished the cabin just in time. They moved their few possessions inside and sealed the gaps between logs with mud and moss. It was not fancy, but it was solid and warm and theirs. On their first night in the completed cabin, they lay together in front of the fireplace, wrapped in blankets and each other's arms. Snow fell softly outside, but inside they were warm and safe. "Do you regret leaving your farm?" Krazka asked softly. Vance thought about it, then shook his head. "No. That farm was where I learned to live at peace, and I am grateful for that. But this place is where I learned to truly live." "The difference is you." Krazka smiled and kissed him gently. "I feel the same. For the first time in my life, I feel like I belong somewhere, not because of my clan or my people, but because I chose to be here with you." They made love that night, slow and tender, celebrating the home they had built and the life they were creating together. Afterward, they lay tangled together, listening to the crackle of the fire and the whisper of falling snow. "What should we call this place?" Krazka asked drowsily. Vance considered. "What about Haven Valley? Because that is what it is for us, a haven." "Haven Valley," Krazka repeated, testing the name. "I like it. It feels right." Winter passed slowly but peacefully. They were snowed in for weeks at a time, but they had prepared well and their supplies held out. They spent the long evenings talking, reading, crafting things for the farm. Krazka taught Vance some orc songs, and he taught her to play a simple flute he had carved. They learned each other's languages more fully. Vance improving his grasp of orc words and Krazka becoming even more fluent in human speech. When spring finally arrived, they planted their fields with the seeds Vance had bought from the trading post. They acquired chickens and a pair of young cows from a nearby homesteader who was moving on. The animals settled in quickly, and soon Haven Valley was a working farm. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. They worked hard during the day and relaxed together in the evenings. Occasionally, they went to the trading post for supplies, and the trader always greeted them pleasantly. They met a few other settlers, and while some were surprised by their partnership, no one was hostile. The Northern Territories attracted people who wanted to escape their pasts and start fresh, and that culture of acceptance extended to Vance and Krazka. One day in late spring, Vance was working in the garden when he heard horses approaching. His heart jumped with the old fear, but when he looked up, he saw it was just the magistrate and his assistant, making their twice-yearly rounds. The magistrate was a stout man with a practical air about him. He dismounted and approached Vance with a professional smile. "Good day. I am Magistrate Carver. I am here to record land claims and check on the settlements in this area." "Vance Thornwood," Vance said, shaking the offered hand. "My partner and I claimed this land last fall. We call it Haven Valley." "Partner," the magistrate glanced around. "Where are they?" As if on cue, Krazka emerged from the cabin. She had been working inside and her hands were covered in flour from baking bread. She stopped when she saw the visitors, her posture becoming wary. The magistrate's eyes widened slightly, but to his credit, he recovered quickly. "Good day, madam." "I am Magistrate Carver. Krazka," she said simply. "I am Vance's bonded partner." "Bonded?" The magistrate looked between them, then seemed to understand. "I see. Well, that is certainly unusual, but it is not unheard of in the territories. As long as you both consent to the arrangement, it is legally recognized." "We do," Vance said firmly. "We are building a life together here." The magistrate nodded and pulled out a ledger. "Then I will record your claim as a joint holding under both your names. How much land are you claiming?" They worked out the details, the magistrate recording their claim to the valley and surrounding hills. He also offered to formalize their bonding with official documentation, which would give them legal protections as a married couple under territorial law. "It is not required," the magistrate explained, "but it can be helpful if you ever have to deal with property disputes or inheritance issues." Vance and Krazka exchanged glances, then both nodded. "We would like that," Vance said. The magistrate prepared the paperwork, and Vance and Krazka both signed. Just like that, they were legally married, their union recognized by the territorial government. After the magistrate left, Krazka laughed with delight. "We are married now, officially." "We were already bonded," Vance pointed out, grinning. "I know, but this makes it real in a different way. Now if anyone questions us, we can show them proof that we belong together." Vance pulled her close, not caring that her hands were still floury. "I never needed proof of that. But I am glad we have it anyway." Summer arrived, and their crops grew strong. They harvested their first wheat crop in late summer, and Vance felt a deep satisfaction at seeing the grain they had grown together. They sold some of their surplus at the trading post and saved the rest for winter. Life was not always easy. There were hard days when the work seemed endless and the future uncertain. There were moments when Krazka struggled with being separated from orc culture, missing the songs and traditions of her people. There were times when Vance had nightmares about the war, or worried about being discovered by people from his past. But they weathered these difficulties together, supporting each other through the hard times and celebrating together during the good times. Their love deepened with every shared challenge, every small victory, every quiet evening spent in each other's company. One autumn evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sun set over their fields, Krazka placed Vance's hand on her belly. "I have something to tell you." Vance looked at her questioningly. "I am pregnant," Krazka said softly. "We are going to have a child." Vance's eyes widened, then filled with tears of joy. "Truly, truly," Krazka confirmed, her own eyes shining. "I have suspected for a few weeks, but now I am certain." Vance pulled her into a tight embrace, overwhelmed with emotion. "A child, we are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" Krazka asked, though she was smiling. "I am terrified and thrilled and happier than I have ever been," Vance said honestly. "How do you feel?" "The same," Krazka admitted. "I do not know how to be a mother. I do not know if our child will look more orc or more human, or how that will affect their life. But I know that we will love them, and that is the most important thing." They spent the rest of the evening talking about the baby, making plans, imagining the future. It was a future that seemed bright and full of possibility, despite the challenges they would undoubtedly face. When spring came again, Krazka gave birth to a healthy baby boy. He had his mother's green skin and pointed ears, but his father's blue eyes and softer features. His tusks, when they came in, were smaller than a typical orc's. He was a perfect blend of both his parents, unique and beautiful. They named him Victor, after Vance's father, with a second name in the orc language that Krazka chose. He was a happy, healthy baby who brought more joy into their lives than either of them had thought possible. As Victor grew, they taught him about both sides of his heritage. Krazka told him orc stories and taught him to value strength and honor. Vance taught him to read and write, and to appreciate the simple satisfaction of growing things. They raised him to be proud of what he was, neither fully orc nor fully human, but something new and special. The years passed peacefully in Haven Valley. They expanded their farm, adding more animals and more crops. They built additions onto their cabin as their family grew, eventually welcoming a daughter they named Alara. They made friends among the other settlers, slowly building a community of people who accepted them for who they were. Occasionally, they heard news from the southern territories. The border wars had finally ended with a lasting peace treaty. Orcs and humans were beginning to establish trade relationships, though tensions remained high. Change was coming slowly, but it was coming. Vance sometimes wondered what had happened to his old farm, whether someone else had claimed it or if it sat abandoned. But those thoughts were fleeting. That life felt like it belonged to a different person, someone who had not yet learned what really mattered. One evening, many years after they had first arrived in Haven Valley, Vance and Krazka sat together on their porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Victor had married a human woman who loved him despite his mixed heritage, and they had given Vance and Krazka 3 beautiful grandchildren. Alara had bonded with a half-orc trader she met at the trading post, and they had 2 children of their own. "Did you ever imagine this?" Krazka asked, gesturing to the scene before them. "When you were standing at that tree line watching a strange orc woman, did you think it would lead to this?" Vance smiled. "No. I thought I would spend the rest of my life alone, farming my land and trying to forget the war. I never imagined I would find love, build a family, create a legacy. I thought I would die alone in the forest," Krazka said quietly. "Cast out from my clan, rejected by humans with nothing but my weapons and my pride. I never imagined I could have this much happiness." Vance took her hand, the same gesture they had shared countless times over the years. The silver ring still glinted on her finger, worn but cherished. "I am glad we were both wrong." "So am I," Krazka agreed. She leaned against him, and they watched the sun set over the valley they had built together. Their story had started with fear and suspicion, with a human and an orc separated by prejudice and history. But it had become something beautiful, a testament to the power of kindness, courage, and love. They had faced every challenge together and had built not just a farm, but a home, a family, and a future that honored both of their heritages. As darkness fell and the stars emerged, Vance and Krazka sat together in comfortable silence, surrounded by the life they had created. The wolves and thieves that had once stayed away from his little farm seemed like a distant memory now. What mattered was the present, this moment, this life they shared, and it was perfect. Word count, 17,000,